Hello, my name is Samitha. In this video, I'll be covering the first book in the Mistborn series, The Final Empire. It'll only be this one because I've barely started the second and I don't want to theorize more than I already will be. The reason why I'll be making guesses all around is because for the first time, I don't have a clear direction of where the themes are going. Although that's a complete lie because thinking about it, I never really had any idea with the Skyward series either, so yeah. I guess what I mean to say is that I think I'm more in the dark about the direction of the discussion within the series now. So I will be taking fragments of the first book to discuss and not everything that was touched on it, because it was a lot. To give you an example, themes worth talking about across the book have to do with godhood and humanity, power and leadership, revolution and freedom, and there is something there regarding betrayal and trust. And that is just what we actually saw. There are other things we have a slight notion of, like the Hero of Ages, the Well of Ascension, and the Deepness, but we don't really know what those mean yet. Honestly, without knowing anything about them, I can't say what they're meant to do for the story and character arcs, so I'll leave all of it out. I can say mainly just the basics. Vin has to destroy or defeat an evil force, which I assume would be the Deepness, and she has to accomplish some trials as she is the Hero of Ages. But that's it. I don't know the symbolism either, so we'll make do with what we have. That's why I will only be talking about what we know of Vin's arc and how it has something to do with the main plot of the book. It could be just my imagination or something I'm just connecting because of my personal experiences and knowledge, but I thought it would be fun to share. Remember, in this video, there will be big spoilers. I will be giving out the major ending, so if you've not read the book, please do so first, and then we'll see each other here. To give a very brief summary, just to refresh your memory, The Final Empire is about a young girl from a very poor thieving crew who gets rescued by a more upper middle class one in order to overthrow the emperor, also called the Lord Ruler. I say that they rescued her because the conditions she was in were very precarious. She had little food and protection, and the crew she was with were little more than strangers on a competition. But going back to the recap, as you might remember, the Lord Ruler governs with an iron fist, starving and enslaving the peasants, or ska, and also by controlling nobles through subtle tactics. He's said to be immortal, which is why the plan to overthrow the empire is more than crazy, as we get reminded over and over. Our protagonists are Vin and Kelsier, Kelsier being the reckless leader, and Vin being the prodigious newbie. There's also the magic system, allomancy, but that is something I won't really be discussing, so the only thing you need to remember is that it was based on swallowing metals. But I mean, who forgets about allomancy? End of a summary. Isn't it great? I'm not sure if I even summarized anything, but yeah, just a reminder of names and the big plot I will be tackling. Anyway, I know this is the book that made Sanderson famous, and I can certainly see why. This novel has to be the best one I've read that he has written, and maybe the best one I've read ever, period. But I have to reiterate that my choice in reading material is a bit influenced by popular book darlings, and some tend to not be great, as not everything will be, so yeah, the bar for me is kinda low. The good thing is that I have a bright future ahead. Anyhow, I enjoyed this book immensely, sometimes even finding it hard to put down, which I had almost never experienced, so I can fairly say it was well written, as it did what it meant to do, at least for me. Of course, this is subjective, but at least I know it has accomplished a lot for most people as well. Now, while I was doing some research for this video, I wanted to see some of the negative criticism of the book to have a full perspective on it, and I found that those negative reviewers had a point. Sometimes Sanderson does more plot-driven books, and characters can get reduced to caricatures, which is fair, and that might not be everyone's cup of tea. I find those critiques are pertinent, even if my experience has not exactly been that. For me, they kind of do fall in the caricature category sometimes, but then I kind of enjoy it as well. Weird. Maybe more so because I come from reading characters that blend with one another all the time, so seeing decently portrayed characters is a breath of fresh air. I can't imagine what well-rounded characters would be like at all, but I'm excited to see what other people deem as full-fledged characters. Going back to the reviewers though, what I agree with the most is maybe the criticism that Mistborn reads more like YA than adult. I think it could be in the way Sanderson tackles themes and how naive the meaning can come across. However, I concede that naivety is not a bad thing and can be a perspective we can enjoy at times, which I have found in Sanderson's books so far. With this, I don't want to say that this is a children's story. I don't mean to imply that. These books have heavier things inside too. It's just the way that those things get resolved can feel a bit adolescent or childlike, more than adolescent, because Sanderson writes happier times and outcomes. I cannot think of adolescence as happy. I hope I'm not the only one, but I mean all that in a good way. Sometimes that naivety or that good I'm talking about is what gets us through all the dark we see, and it's not my place to take that away from anyone. The problem could be then that in real life, it doesn't quite work that way, and we can keep on trying to believe something that doesn't help our cause just for happiness sake, but in the end we can end up more miserable than when we started. Or I mean, that's what used to happen to me. I don't want to generalize. But anyway, once I finish Sanderson's book, I have a more rounded perspective on him and his writing, and might do a video touching on those criticisms and maybe my thoughts on those too, if anyone is interested. For now, if you, the one that hasn't read the book, are still here, this is the moment spoilers start, so I appreciate you, but goodbye. I will start the analysis of a novel with the most basic thing we know about it. Theme-wise, many people tend to assume, correctly so, that the theme is about trust, about learning to trust regardless of the circumstances. And I would say, yes, the theme is about that. Starting out, Vin has every reason not to trust. She had been betrayed once by her brother, Breen, because he abandoned her to creeps who are also thieves. She was in constant competition for resources with them. She was being horribly mistreated by her leader. And she was a small girl whom people perceived as weak. She could be crossed at any time without major consequences too, because back then she was not even a Mistborn, or she didn't know how to control her powers at least, so that made her easy prey. It wasn't hard to assume then that when introduced to Kelsier's crew, she wouldn't agree to give out trust out of the kindness of her heart. Finn would have to confront her very, very, very primal expectation of betrayal that was built by years of mistreatment if she were going to have an arc in the story. That's a safe thing to conclude. So yes, it is about trusting regardless, but I want to add another layer. It is not only about Vin's trust, or Kelsier's, or any individual's for that matter. I want to move the lens from the people in the group and turn it outward. After all, Vin's trust had an impact on the plot because the final empire fell, and the Lord Ruler within it fell too, as a direct consequence of her trust in the crew. Without trust, she would have probably left or betrayed Kelsier. Then the Lord Ruler would still have been ruling, and Vin could have had a better life, or a worse one, but the status quo would be maintained. I'm sorry if this is obvious, but I don't think people go beyond what trust does to us individually, and I would like to give it more importance than just knowing how impactful trust is for our emotional well-being and that of those closest to us. Trust is also fundamental for rebellion, meaning that without trusting each other, rebellion cannot be possible. It's about trusting regardless. True, but not only trusting one another, but trusting with a collective goal in mind. Yes, I know, very political, and I know some won't like it, but I guess it can't be helped this time because we cannot separate Kelsier's revolution from the themes of trust and Vin's journey from it. We just can't. Besides, revolutions are inherently political, so don't blame me here. Seeing that this is somewhat evident because trusting the crew made Vin powerful enough to overthrow the final empire, what I would like to keep on conversing about is how Sanderson gets us there. I want to point out the way he gets to set proposition, the means to get to that conclusion, which I also think is important. Not necessarily because I agree with it or not, but because there is some subtext in Sanderson's narrative that we can naturalize sometimes, and therefore not draw any contrasting opinions on. I won't be portraying my own. That is something each of us decides, so I will point out what I observe and you make the choice. Although this is not something entirely truthful because I already said things that could give away my thoughts, but I would like to try to detach myself from what comes next from anyone watching to conclude for themselves, if possible. Keep in mind this discussion is biased because it comes from my interpretation, but there is no real objective view on things, so whatever, I can only do so much. The first thing I want to bring up is the context in which Sanderson immerses us. It is Lutherdale, or the central dominance in general. We get some sense of what goes beyond the city, but most of it is an assumption. We don't know if everything behaves in the rest of the countryside as within the plantations, but we ultimately have only official information coming from the Empire, so we cannot be completely sure. The Lord Ruler's despotic rule is defined by different kinds of oppression, meant for different segments of the population. But we get that they apply to all the kingdom, so we'll start with that. There is racial oppression with the Terracemen and the Ska, as even the Ska are considered racially inferior in a way, because they're supposedly less intelligent and weaker, and the Terracemen are also relegated to being servants, as they are a different race entirely. There is also reproductive oppression, as the Terracemen are heavily controlled regarding who can reproduce and who can't, to limit the power they can concentrate, just as much as the Ska, for exactly the same reasons. Those Ska who somehow manage to obtain that power, aka allomancy, are eliminated promptly or eventually. Add to that the access to knowledge, as the Lord Ruler ended thousands of religions and restricted books that not even the nobility could read or access, and you have the very definition of oppression. But there's more, if you can't believe it. There is also the privilege granted in the form of lineage to nobles. They have more degrees of freedom presented in the form of allomancy and resources. Resources obviously refer to wealth and income passed on from father to son, and allomancy is power transmitted through blood. The reason I separate it from race is because it's not only a racial thing, but also something passed on by generations. So it's oppression in the form of inheritance or wealth and power, regardless of the race. As a side note, gender can be counted too, as kings or leaders of noble houses are mostly people culturally referred to as men, so add that to the list. Linked to this is also a clear hierarchy of power imposed by the Lord Ruler, where he is the strongest and the rest follow in clear distinction. And if that weren't enough, there are also the soothing stations in Lutherdale, as a means to further avoid revolution. And as many know, soothing feelings of anger can turn to depression, and any action to be taken will not be taken. It's a perpetual cycle of inaction, and a form of oppression too. In a world filled with so much coercion and so much helplessness, everything within the system will further perpetuate it. Physically speaking, this guy have no way of making a decent living or gather strength for a revolution. They also don't have a way to feel the anger they need to act. And the violence the Lord Ruler instills has no bounds because he's a god and he has all the power and his people don't. There is no access to get new ideas or means to get out of that system. Tell me, how can anyone rebel under those conditions? Then you get Vin, a Ska immersed in that way of life, where the only method of survival, the only viable option for peasants like her to get ahead is to betray. There is no way of getting what they need if the crews don't steal or turn on each other, or turn on the weakest. Resources are scarce, and taking them from another is the fastest way to ensure you survive in the now. Even the noble houses trick each other into alliances because there's no other way to obtain the money and the power. Finn has no other choice. The Ska have no other choice. The Terracemen have no other choice. Oppression is the way to remove all choice from the parties involved. Keep this in mind because it will be important. In whatever case, all choice is therefore allotted to one person, the Lord Ruler. But then Kelsier emerges with a different attitude, an attitude to smile as a way to break that oppression. The way Sanderson presents Kelsier is to give a different perspective to Vin. He has been through the hardest of betrayals and still came out trusting. If you remember, Kelsier was supposedly betrayed by his own lover, Mare, just when they were about to take a big win against the Emperor. The way it was described, the way the Lord Ruler thanked Mare, leaves little doubt in everyone's mind. Kelsier was betrayed. And even then, Kelsier arrives at another conclusion. I think given the choice between loving Mare, betrayal included, and never knowing her, I'd choose love. I risked and I lost, but the risk was still worth it. It's the same with my friends. Suspicion is healthy in our profession, but only to an extent. I'd rather trust my men than worry about what will happen if they turn on me. That sounds foolish, Vin said. Is happiness foolish? Kelsier asked, turning toward her. Where have you been happier, Vin? On my crew or back with Kamen? In that moment, when Kelsier says that to Vin, he opens the door for Vin to do different. To open herself up to happiness and trust. Kelsier had changed her, showed her by means of trust that things could change, that she could trust. She went from believing it was all a lie to ultimately consoling Kelsier using his own teachings. Once, maybe, I would have thought you a fool, but, well, that's kind of what trust is, isn't it? A willful self-delusion. You have to shut out that voice that whispers about betrayal and just hope that your friends aren't going to hurt you. And I can see how a person, given the choice between two assumptions, would choose to trust. The important part here is Vin's last words. Choose to trust. Through Kelsier's help, trust becomes a choice for Vin. And Vin chooses to trust. The choice Kelsier gives Vin is powerful, from getting no choice from the system to getting one. It is the most powerful tool Kelsier could have given Vin. At least, it was what Sanderson emphasizes. But this choice has something else embedded into it. Belief. And this is where we get all the terrorist man lore. Says it, the most important terrorist man we meet is all about belief. He is the embodiment of belief, and his specialty is religion. He, as a keeper, one who stores knowledge, specializes in the branch most related to belief. Religion. But belief is also equated to something else essential for any religion. Hope. Beliefs, to Seysid, equal hope. The sole purpose of keeping religions alive is to hope for a brighter future in which he will be able to impart that knowledge to a new generation free of strife. He needs to believe that there is an alternative possible. So what Kelsier gives Vin, asking her to believe in her bandmates, is ultimately hope. Hope that things can turn out differently, that they can all trust each other. Hope is then the motor behind trust. The hope of a better future, and that is what Kelsier symbolizes. He says it explicitly too. You tried, Kelsier replied, his voice loud and firm, carrying across the square. But you can kill me, Lord Tyrant. I represent the thing you've never been able to kill, no matter how hard you try. I am hope. And here it is, what hope is, or as Seysid describes it. Men are more resilient than that, I think. Our belief is often strongest when it should be weakest. That is the nature of hope. But what does this mean for trust? Are hope and trust the same thing? If we go back to the quote Vin mentioned, she says that trust is a willful self-delusion. And what is hope but a willful self-delusion? And even when looking in the dictionary, there's a definition including trust in there, even if archaic. The conclusion in the end is, why not? Why not keep believing, hoping for a bigger and brighter future where we can all trust each other and fight for change? It all comes back to that choice that we were talking about in the beginning. The choice the Lord Ruler took for himself, but Kelsier dared to take back. The choice between having faith and not having it. It's the choice of never letting the hope go. The choice of trusting regardless of the circumstances. This choice can bring rebellion to the people and bring their freedom. The people believed in Kelsier, believed in hope. Thus, they were able to break the Lord Ruler's empire. Vin decided to trust Kelsier, and he gave her the mists. He gave her freedom. Why did this god dream of rebellion? For freedom. To offer a conclusion to Sanderson's possible message, the way to our rebellion is marked by faith. The method he proposes to accomplish a successful revolution is to trust each other and trust that the revolution will eventually happen because we're all in it together. But we have to be all in it together. I guess that's the final condition. To be free, we must first hope, trust, and unite, even when everything seems against us. What do you think about the themes now? Did any of my ramblings give you any new insights? Do you think they're encouraging or naive? Is it necessary to have this mindset to find happiness, as Kelsier says? And in the end, does Mistborn read as YA? Even if a little? Let me know in the comments, and like and subscribe too, if you want to support me. Bye bye.